Thank you so much, Brian. There we go. Really appreciate the kind words, Brian, and appreciate everyone's time. Today, we'll spend, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes talking about AI, a lot on what we're seeing in the field, some of the most prevalent use cases. But just to start, my name is Jason Langoni. I run our AI business development here at Nutanix. I was actually a super, super early employee at this company, signed an offer letter way back in 2011, long before AI was a thing, maybe even before hyperconvergence was a thing. Was at the company for 8 years, had a bunch of different really interesting roles, and then left for 4 years because silly me thought the grass was greener back in the startup space. I did a generative AI startup for a couple of years, learned a ton. I'll share a lot of those learnings today and have been back at Nutanix for actually just over a year now. So it's been, as you would imagine, 100 miles an hour in the world of AI. So let me get my slides showing here. There we go. So, if we just start to kind of talk through, what have we been seeing? What are folks like yourselves, doing, as it relates to AI or generative AI? I mean, probably no surprise. ChatGPT was the big eye opener, right? All of a sudden, anybody, no matter what level of technical acumen, they might have, could ask a question to an artificial intelligence that they didn't even have to run and start to get valuable or semi-valuable answers back. We really saw this as, turning the light bulb on for a lot of enterprise organizations where they realize, okay, we want something like this when our employees or our customers or our contractors or consultants are interacting with an artificial intelligence. We want to make sure that, maybe that sensitive information or those ideas or those questions or the data that they're uploading to the AI stays within, the confines of our governance and our security posture. But again, ChatGPT was very much the big eye opener for everybody, and I'm sure that's not surprising. Uh, the pace at which all of this is moving is really interesting. Again, it might not be surprising, especially now at this point where it seems like every other week a new model's coming out that did better than the model that came out, last week or last month. But, if in 2022 it was all about kind of the emergence of large language models, models that were really good at doing and answering maybe semi-generic questions with really cohesive answers back. Last year, we really started to see the emergence of reasoning models. So now, instead of just asking a question, getting an answer back, now you can start to see how the artificial intelligence is getting to, a particular answer. And again, we're seeing more and more model types start to emerge as well. And then clearly, probably the biggest news of the last 45 days, maybe, is DeepSeek, which is another reasoning model. But the most interesting thing about DeepSeek, whether you're allowed to use it or not, is the technology that they put together to actually build and train the model. The kind of the big takeaway from DeepSeek is you potentially need a lot less GPUs than we ever thought you may need to start building some of these really valuable reasoning models. So again, whether you're going to be permitted to use DeepSeek or not based on your corporate posture, the technologies that are emerging again pretty much every month at this point are really offering up breakthroughs that us on the enterprise side are going to be able to take advantage of. So here just to kind of dive in a little bit more into reasoning models, and again here we're telling the artificial intelligence that it's a math tutor. And again, in kind of the chat GPT days, you would ask a question, the large language model would churn through some, GPU horsepower on the back end and spit an answer back. Now what's happening is the artificial intelligence is asking itself multiple questions. It's iterating through. So now what we're seeing is an increase in consumption of GPU horsepower, maybe some CPU horsepower as well, but also the overall complexity in the models and the model architecture that's likely to emerge, very likely this year in 2025 for a lot of enterprise organizations. Just kind of a little fact here, but again, probably not surprising to anybody. The models are getting really, really, really good, especially at kind of, basic tasks, as well as we're starting to see the emergence of some really strong models at doing, math analysis, which has historically been a weakness of most models. So to kind of sum up what we've been seeing out in the field, 2024, most organizations were getting started deploying the first large language model, maybe unlocking search on a repository of documents through something called retrieval augmented generation, these AI chatbots, which we're all probably very familiar with now. But 2025, we're certainly starting to see, enterprise organizations at least start to think through how might we take advantage of these reasoning models that are coming out? How might we kind of up level process automation or even robotic process automation that we've been doing for well over a decade with this new emerging, AI technology? So why does this matter from an IT person's perspective, right? If in, 22 to 24, and even clearly today, folks are deploying kind of basic chat applications, chat bots, for the most part, that's interacting with one model. So you've got a query that comes in. Again, it places some demand, typically on an NVIDIA GPU, and an answer is surmised, and that answer is then sent back, into whatever the interface might be, a chat widget on a website, a pretty web page. It looks like a chat GPT, something on a mobile app, etc. Click this again. Where this is going, and for many that we're already starting to do these experimentations and these architectures, is now we're not just interacting with a single large language model. Now we've recognized, hey, we may need some guardrails in place. Let's put a guardrail large language model in the mix to filter questions and make sure people aren't asking things they shouldn't, and also candidly filter answers as well. We're starting to see these reasoning models. We're starting to see external calling to other systems as people start to stitch together again, what will likely be the next wave of, process automation powered by AI. It's going to require a lot more compute. It's going to require more data. And it's also going to require much more complex management of a multitude of models that are now starting to emerge. So Nutanix has, very much recognized that there's a gap for most enterprise organizations, which is as we continue to evolve to more complex AI systems, how is IT going to manage the models that are allowed to be used, control that through role-based access control, serve up the models, because models candidly are just files that need to be served up so systems and users can communicate with the models. And then again, all of this is still just software. How do we troubleshoot? How do we empower IT to be able to troubleshoot, artificial intelligence performance? And again, while that might not be mission critical today, that's certainly going to become mission critical for most organizations here in the coming year or two. Ooh, I'm going to click too fast. There we go. So for those maybe unfamiliar, Nutanix launched our AI product, something we call Nutanix Enterprise AI, in November of last year. We've got a lot of great customers already, and we'll talk about some of those use cases. But it's our first product that we have launched that is candidly completely disconnected from the rest of the Nutanix portfolio. You can certainly use it with the components you see here. You can run it on Nutanix Kubernetes. You can run it on Nutanix Kubernetes on our hypervisor. You can use our unified storage. But Nutanix Enterprise AI, the product, can run anywhere there's Kubernetes, which means it could be our own Kubernetes. It could be OpenShift. It could be Rancher. It could be Kubernetes up in AWS or Azure. It could be Kubernetes on bare metal. You don't necessarily need a hypervisor underneath as well, because we've kind of taken this stance that we believe AI needs to have a hybrid cloud strategy for most organizations. They may do their tuning and training, maybe up at a public cloud provider. They may deploy sensitive models or models that are going to access proprietary information in their core data centers. And for those that operate at the edge, they may want inferencing. They may want to empower employees out at the edge with lighter infrastructure, maybe smaller models, and have a central management plane for this artificial intelligence that spans everything from public cloud to core data center out to the edge. So, this is where we continue to march towards. We're certainly seeing this align with, demand from, existing customers of ours who've been using our hyper-converged infrastructure for, 2 years, 5 years, 12 years, as well as new customers to Nutanix who are looking to build out, this enterprise AI infrastructure. So kind of give you a different visual here. Certainly what we've seen for organizations who have started down this journey is a lot of folks start with an AI application off the shelf. So they've decided they want a chatbot, they want a digital assistant, they're going to do enterprise search, whatever the use case might be. And there's a company that does this so they don't have to go, build some bespoke solution. We see a lot of this. Typically, these off-the-shelf AI applications don't even disclose the models they're using. They have an inference engine or the ability to serve up that model internal to the app, kind of a black box architecture. And as organizations continue to deploy these off-the-shelf AI applications, they have no centralized visibility into models that are being used, into the performance of the model or the inference engine. And also typically they start to design, just in this type of an architecture, GPU silos. So you've got GPUs that, some are fairly expensive, some are really expensive. They might be sitting around doing 15% utilization, 25% utilization. So this is silos on silos on silos with very little visibility. And so what we've started to embrace with, our customers that are marching down this path, which is, hey, let's start with some really quick to value AI applications off the shelf, is let's work with that, ISV, let's work with that company that deploys that app or builds that app and say, what models does this application use? We're going to serve those models up and just connect your app into, our inference infrastructure. So we've certainly have seen a demand for this. A lot of our projects are around, kind of this notion of let's centralize command and control over the models that are being used. Again, think about DeepSeek. It hit the news, I don't know, on a Thursday or a Friday. Really interesting. And fast forward, not even a week later, there's a lot of commentary on we're not going to let our employees use it, or maybe there's a security risk. So having centralized control over the models that are allowed to be used allows IT, allows your organization to pull the plug or quarantine consumption of that model if they need to, for liability reasons, security reasons, export reasons. So that's just one of the kind of the many drivers we've seen of organizations starting to build out this centralized inference infrastructure. The other big piece here is you can become much more efficient in how you're using the GPUs that your organization is buying. So it's kind of summarizing what we've seen over the last year with, the majority of our customers. Again, there's a lot of great studies, whether it's Gartner, whether it's HBR, or wherever it is, there's a lot of great data points that strongly suggest step one for most organizations is to deploy a large language model internally. One, any question that's being asked that large language model is now within the confines of your organization, so you have no, leakage in that regard. And two, it's a forcing function typically for the organization to start to think through from a process perspective, from a technology perspective, and from an area of responsibility perspective, who's going to be in charge of serving this model up? How do we start to build some operational muscle around, supporting the performance of the model, thinking through when we need to start scaling out, whether it's GPUs or additional nodes, to support, the growing large language model consumption. Chat-based agents, digital assistants, again, to really kind of next level the customer experience or the employee experience. Extremely popular use cases. Enterprise search, which is probably the one you see most in your LinkedIn feed, people talking about retrieval augmented generation. I mean, we've got customers themselves that generate about 1 million PDFs across multiple languages a month. And for them, instead of having someone do a control F through a bunch of documents or PDF files to try and find something and continue to kind of control F, control F, control F until they do, now they can have a conversation, with an enterprise search that's powered by AI. They ask the question, they're getting an answer back from the artificial intelligence that's pulling the information directly from documents, PDF files, even PowerPoint presentations, and then showing you the source so you can validate what the AI is bringing back to you. And then the last piece that we kind of talked about is shared services organizations building out an inference infrastructure. Here you see, a sample of some of our most strategic AI partners, whether it's NVIDIA, one from a GPU perspective, but also from a NIMS or an NVAIE perspective. Hugging Face, which is the world's largest model repository, and certainly pretty much any model you might want to test out is there. We'll talk about that integration in a minute, but also enterprise search and RAG solutions from companies like Prion, multi-language models from Mistral, really interesting GPU appliances from Liquid, and you see a bunch of others here. Happy to dive in the future on any of them. So before we jump into a little look at the product, let's understand where Nutanix Enterprise AI fits into an overall enterprise architecture. And again, in this example, we are running it on Nutanix Cloud Infrastructure to include our hypervisor. But, candidly speaking, we see folks buying Dell or HPE or Cisco or Lenovo bare metal servers with really nice GPUs in them. All that we really require is a Kubernetes platform to run on. So in this case, start the conversation, think about, the AI architecture from the Kubernetes level, because it's all container-based apps in the AI world. And then if you think about what those applications actually need to run, they need access to a model. They need, the ability to understand telemetry of what's going good, what's going wrong. And this is what we've delivered with enterprise AI from Nutanix. So the first piece, and we'll jump into a product demo in a second, but the first piece is centralized command and control over the models that are allowed to be used. And I will say probably my biggest takeaway or lesson learned when I was back in the AI startup space is that the legal department is very much involved now. It used to be when I was having conversations on virtual desktop infrastructure or virtual infrastructure in general, we would talk to security, we would talk to compliance, and then the rest was about the business or about IT. Now, the chief legal officer has entered the chat, general counsel are in these meetings. So really, if I have any advice to kind of offer here, it's engage your legal team early. As you think kind of through AI adoption over the coming years, it's still very, very early days. You're going to want a good partnership with your legal department. Again, it's a drastically changing landscape. The ability to authorize and then decommission models, quarantine models will be really important. So the first thing we deliver is that enterprise model repository with hooks into Hugging Face or the NVIDIA model catalog, or even manually import your own. RBAC, role-based access controls to control who's actually got access to which particular model, what app has access to which particular models. An inference endpoint, so we're now talking about serving up the model. Again, these are things we've simplified through a delightful user interface. And then the last piece, day two operations, troubleshooting performance, because now it's not just CPU and storage performance or virtual networking performance. Now it's what are the GPUs doing? Is there latency from the endpoint itself? Are the requests coming in to our inference endpoint properly formed, or do we need to go back to the application developer? That's Nutanix Enterprise AI. It runs anywhere there's Kubernetes. If you follow us on LinkedIn, you probably have seen something called GPT in a box. GPT in a box is our reference architecture that includes, essentially the full Nutanix portfolio, delivering an AI platform. So that includes our Kubernetes, includes our cloud infrastructure, unified storage, database service. It's offered up in a single SKU with the notion to make it easy for customers to get started. Again, this is just one of the many packaging options of Nutanix Enterprise AI. It's the most popular, most common that we see being deployed right now, mostly because people want to focus on the AI applications themselves. But you could also procure Nutanix Enterprise AI either standalone or with our Kubernetes as well. Ooh, so let me stop here. Let me see if I can jump over to my screen, other screen. Just walk you through the product just for a quick second. So what we're looking at here is Nutanix Kubernetes. And again, whether you use our Kubernetes platform or not, it's certainly your prerogative. If you are using Nutanix Kubernetes to deploy and install Nutanix Enterprise AI as a single click. If you're using OpenShift, for example, it's just a Helm chart deployment, so it's not a big deal either way. Once we log into Nutanix Enterprise, as you would expect, kind of typical dashboard, green is good, red is bad. But if we look over to the left, we'll see, a couple of, primary options, models and endpoints. And models is where we're going to go to import, a model that we've decided is allowed to be used within this company. And here you see the options on where you bring a model in from. Again, the NVIDIA model catalog, which also includes NIM deployments, Hugging Face, which is the largest repo on the planet. And you can also import a model manually if you're in a disconnected or a regulated environment and you don't have access to the internet. If you fine-tuned or trained your own model, if you've licensed a model from somebody for your particular industry, you could bring that model in as well. So no shortage of options on where you're bringing models in from. Again, kind of this freedom of choice. Here, in this demo, we're using the NVIDIA model catalog. So we're going to pick one of the validated models here, picking a Llama 3.1. We click import. We give it a name, a unique name in the environment. So I think that's 4 clicks. The model's been imported. It'll go from pending to active. But now the model has been brought into that Nutanix cluster or wherever that's running, in a Kubernetes environment. It's using Nutanix Unified Storage to store the model. Now we need to go serve the model up. So again, I want you to, as you're kind of looking through this product and as we walk on this demo together, hopefully it aligns with, we built this very much for IT. This is not, hardcore command line for AI ML developers or ML data scientists. We've recognized and we've taken an approach that ultimately IT will operate and maintain the AI infrastructure for most enterprise organizations. So let's focus on what are the most common tasks that IT will need to do as it relates to AI. What are the most common, troubleshooting and support kind of functions they'll need to do. And also, can we just make this easy because we know models are coming out constantly, and a lot of organizations are going to want to start doing rapid prototyping, across a bunch of different models and pick the winner and move on to the next one. So we've brought in Llama 3. Now we're going to go to endpoints and serve this model up. And again, not wildly complicated. We're going to attach it to some GPUs if we have some GPUs. If we want it to be highly available, we're going to give it more than one instance. And then we're going to generate a secret key so that we can give that to the application developer, the end user, so they can actually connect to the model we're serving up, in this case, Llama 3.1. And here, again, you see dashboard, you get telemetry from the endpoint. But again, hopefully you kind of walk away that this is a fairly simplified experience. There's a lot going on under the covers. I'll give you an example. Based on the model you pick, we're determining the optimal inference engine to serve up that model. Nutanix Enterprise AI didn't exist. One, you'd probably be doing a lot of this from the command line. And two, you would be testing out NIM and TGI and, continuing to iterate and try and figure out what's the best engine to serve up the models. And again, it's just time wasted. We optimize that, for you. So again, your organization can focus on, higher up the food chain value as it relates to AI. So, and if you have questions at the end, we can certainly cover those as well. Let me get back to PowerPoint. So I know most of this presentation is focused on, our AI product, Nutanix Enterprise AI. Let me move my chat window a little bit, maybe. But it's also worth noting that, Nutanix is, a platform that's got a lot of really mission critical components for AI workloads, one of which is data management, data storage. And I won't spend a ton of time here, but kind of at a high level, it's important to recognize that AI workloads, whether you're training models yourselves, which is not, kind of what the average bear does, but some people do, fine tuning will certainly become something most organizations, embark on, maybe not this year, but certainly in the coming years. Running inferencing, creating content, storing all of this, it's unique requirements. And all of these requirements can be satisfied through Nutanix Unified Storage. And again, I know a lot of people don't necessarily think, Nutanix storage for AI workloads, but even if we look at the latest ML perf numbers, I mean, we're doing a killer job here. We saturated over 1,000 H100 GPUs, and if you look at some of the other products that are listed here, some of the other organizations, some of which are probably even better known to be a storage platform for AI, they're not delivering nearly the same type of performance. So the only thing I kind of mentioned here is Nutanix can help you run the AI workloads. We certainly can help your organization build out an inference infrastructure. And we also have a data platform when it makes sense, again, for tuning or training or powering the AI workloads, because most of them are very data intensive. A couple of really nice validations from NVIDIA. And again, you'll see a lot of announcements at NVIDIA GTC, which is next month. If you happen to be going to NVIDIA GTC, feel free to reach out. We're running some workshops. We've got a couple of cool events. I'm happy to get you the invite to that. Let me power on through here just a little bit. So a quick note on, how are we using enterprise AI, generative AI internally. About a year ago now, we launched something called Support GPT. So this is for a support organization. It's a retrieval augmented generation solution that uses a large language model, and then it's pointed to repositories like our knowledge base articles, both internal and external, support ticket repository, information from the customer's own environment, pulse data. And what this does is when one of our customers calls support and opens a ticket, the person on the other end of the phone can now, essentially have a chat conversation to help get down a path of resolution exponentially faster than they could before. And the information, the steps that might be needed for troubleshooting are delivered to that support engineer with a link to that particular passage and in a user manual or a troubleshooting guide, so that they can again validate that the answers are good. Here you see that's had a really significant impact already. I know even my first stint at Nutanix, we took pride in our NPS score, as an organization, that when customers do have to call us, again, it's software, you need to open up support tickets at some point, that it's a positive experience, that the tickets are resolved and that they're resolved in a timely manner. And again, this is just helping us continue to maintain, that delightful experience that we offer to our customers. We got some other internal examples that we could share, and I'll follow on, but this is by far the most popular one internally. Kind of talking through, how are our customers, using Nutanix Enterprise AI. Again, this is a good example because this is a multinational conglomerate who's got a lot of subsidiaries, and they took kind of the top-down approach of, one, AI is important for our business. Two, we need to centralize, the authorization of what models will be used. Again, some of it comes down to specific legislation in a given country. We need to centralize what the model authorization. We need to centralize model serving. And then we also want to start building out, reports to understand AI adoption across, different lines of business within each portfolio company. So they took the approach where they're going to spin up an endpoint, and go back to that Llama 3 model example. They're going to spin up a Llama 3 endpoint for each line of business within each subsidiary, so they can understand, wow, why is HR at this subsidiary using AI exponentially more than anybody else across the portfolio? And, again, I've shared this before, but oftentimes we see AI adoption not just tied to how good is a solution technically, but how much engagement and enablement occurred with the end users of the AI solution. And again, technology is a really important part of this, but having end user outreach or employee outreach is, I would say, equally important to make sure that people are comfortable using it. They're going to have questions. They're going to look for guidance on how do I use this most efficiently or effectively. Again, it's just a really good opportunity to engage the end users. And so as we start to come to a wrap here and we get into some Q&A, again, large language model deployment, in a private cloud environment is certainly something we're seeing a ton of. Enterprise search, digital assistants, chatbots, all extremely popular no matter what vertical an organization is in. We will start to see experimentation with agentic AI. Maybe folks will start to use kind of low risk existing processes to test agentic AI this year. Again, now the technology is available. Most of these models are on Hugging Face, so we can start to experiment in the comfort and confines of our own private cloud or multi-cloud environment. And then 2026 and beyond, who knows? But we certainly know that reasoning will continue to get better. You start to couple that with other technologies or adjacent technologies, and I think it'd be really wild to see where we're at in probably 2 to 3 years. We're here to help everyone on their journey. We've learned a lot ourselves even over the last year. I'm in probably 5 or 6 customer conversations a day, a couple of project kickoffs every week. Happy to share what we've seen work, things we've seen not work so well. And again, please consider us as you continue to build out your AI infrastructure to give you that centralized command and control over the models that you're going to allow your organization to use. And then maybe with that, Brian, we could open it up to Q&A. I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, there's one question in the chat there. Jason, is this charge in views or license per user?
Oh, good question. So Nutanix Enterprise AI is licensed by the CPU cores where it's running and the amount of memory in the GPUs that we're using to serve up models. So it's an interesting question to me because most licensed models for AI products are around consumption. How many tokens are we using? How many calls, API calls are we making? And to me, okay, that makes sense, but it potentially stifles my desire or my ability to prototype or our organization's ability to prototype. We want people asking all kinds of questions, learning all kinds of things. So we've even got customers that are running Nutanix Enterprise AI up in their AWS tenancy, serving up a model that they then give to their users just so they don't have to worry about how many tokens are we going to use. So yeah, great question.
But no other. Well, actually, here's another one that just popped in. For enterprise AI, can we run this in a single physical server setup?
Since it's based on Kubernetes, most customers will run this on a 3-node setup. So they've got the Kubernetes management nodes running and then the worker nodes running. If you already had infrastructure to run kind of the core Kubernetes management components, you certainly could run this, on a server, with some worker nodes, and Nutanix Enterprise AI would run on top. Certainly possible. The most common kind of configuration we see is very reminiscent of what we saw in VDI days, where people were standing up new clusters, small clusters, but let's stand this up because it's a unique workload with semi-exotic requirements. So we're going to go stand up this new cluster with some GPUs and we'll scale out as we're successful. But you can certainly bite it off small too.
Outstanding. Well, when I look across the attendee, obviously I see a lot of them that some people we've had some discussions with. So Jason, I'll phrase it like this. What do you see as there's a lot of people at different stages with this topic. So I'm going to kind of phrase it out in 3 different ways, and maybe you can give us 3 different answers. If I'm completely new to this topic, what is a great starting spot to come off of this as a next step? We know that it's relevant. We know that it's going to be applicable the next basically 6 months to year to 6 to 18 months. So that's the first one. The second one is that we've already waded into this. what is that logical next step for me? And the other ones is that we're already deploying some stuff. Where can Nutanix come alongside us?
All a great three-pronged question. Um, for those starting, most data very strongly suggests that a great step one is to deploy, a corporately sanctioned large language model. It's a very easy, initial step. Pretty low blast radius, low risk factor. And again, you get comfortable and your teams get comfortable one using and interacting with a large language model, and you can teach your users how to become, sophisticated at using it versus just asking a question. For most organizations, that's very much step one. And I think it's a good step one. For those that are already along the journey a little bit, they've already got maybe their own internal GPT stood up. I would encourage you to, if you don't have a specific business challenge in mind, look at your business processes that have been documented over the last decade and start to think through where could we potentially transform this process through the application of AI. Again, organization doing RPA for a very long time or process mining. So there's a lot of really good documentation at most organizations that exists for their business processes. And again, alongside Choice, we're happy to, run one of these types of process identification workshops as well. But it's a really great place to look. For those that have been doing it, maybe they've already stood up enterprise search. Maybe they've got a chatbot or two or three. Where we see those types of organizations, starting to look, is this world of agentic AI? It's like, all right, how do we think through stitching together all of the models our organizations likely going to want to use over the coming years? How do we wrap that in governance? How do we make sure, again, if we have to quarantine a model or pull the plug, that we have the ability to? How do we see all of this centrally, and how do we roll this up to our C-level executives? Again, alongside Choice, we're happy to, help you deploy these frameworks or think through what a framework looks like for your organization and start to build some assets together to, again, kind of make this more tangible for everybody.
So what is safe to say is that if we're in the first group, would potentially like an AI workshop with Choice and Nutanix, would that be a great first step just to kind of further go from this conversation to start unpacking it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We're running them all the time. I was on a planning call this morning for one we're running in Frankfurt here next week, but that's a great first step for sure.
And then in the maybe group two and group three is maybe more of an in-depth architectural discussion. I guess as a follow-up next step is so it's not just the workshop, but maybe more in-depth type discussion with that. I guess it just not trying to lead you there, but what would that be the right next step for them?
Yeah, spot on, Brian. It's very
Okay.
good.
Outstanding. Well, there is one last question before we quit. What usage metrics are you able to see about the different endpoints you create?
Yeah, so the primary metric is number of calls. So we've seen some customers do some interesting stuff with this data. Again, if you think at a C level, where the CEO's got to report to the board on, where are we on our AI journey or our AI strategy? We've got a couple of customers that are taking that endpoint consumption data and then extrapolating that into percentage of users or percentage of adoption for a particular line of business, turning that into a pretty PDF or a pretty PowerPoint presentation, and then rolling that up to C staff. That's the primary metric. We continue to add in other metrics, but that's the one most people are interested in. Is all right. How many calls are coming, or how many calls are coming from unique users or applications, so we can understand kind of the breadth of consumption for that particular model.
Outstanding. Outstanding. And Jason, we appreciate your time today. And I guess what I would just challenge this, like I said, I know some of you are customers of Nutanix and we appreciate the partnership. Some of you are new. Understand that in these discussions, we're going to be talking about platforms. So we're not talking about products. We're not here to sell you something bigger, better, faster, like I alluded to earlier. It's really is coming alongside you. And that's the thing that Choice loves about the platform is that like I said, any hypervisor, any hardware, any cloud scaler is that we're talking about whether we're talking about unified storage, whether we're talking about AI, whether we're talking about that modernized data center, or whether they're talking about private public cloud integration. It's the platform discussion. And so I think that where's the best place for us to start? And I think Jason kind of even talked about business process processes. We'd also say is what is in the budget this year and where can we start as you're trying to modernize and as you're trying to work through some of these more strategic discussions around AI or how do we help empower and engage the business. So on behalf of all the team at Choice and at Nutanix, we appreciate your partnership. We thank you for your trust, giving us this hour, and we look forward to the follow-up discussion. So with that, Ellie, thank you for hosting this. And like I said, please complete your survey. And like I said, we appreciate the partnership. Have a great day.